Hello, welcome to the PowerShell New York City user group. I'm your host, Doug Fink. Tonight, we're going to be getting a presentation from James Brundage about Irregular, which is regular expressions made strangely simple. Before we do that, though, a little bit of housekeeping. Coming up, one of our next talks is going to be by Josh King. He created the PowerShell Toast module, and he's going to do toast notifications with PowerShell from noob to master. So you want to get onto the meetup and RSVP to that. It should be a really good talk. Looking forward to it. And additionally, I'll drop this into the chat. If you head over to my YouTube channel, this is where I post all the videos for the meetups that we have. You can go back and see ones that we've had over the last year. And this is where I'll post new ones. So if you forget to RSVP, but you're subscribed to this channel and you get the notifications, you'll know when I post material there. I also post videos about PowerShell from time to time. So I think it's a good resource that you should consider checking out. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on. So James Brundage is going to be here tonight. Looking forward to this talk. And I'm reading his details. If you try to solve a problem with regular expressions, you normally get two problems. That's the old XKCD joke, if you want to go look that up. It doesn't have to be that way, though. You can learn how to write complicated regular expressions without memorizing arcane syntax. Learn a new trick or two and see what you can really do with a regex. So James is going to go through his bio a little bit, but he was a former member of the PowerShell team. That's where I met him a number of years ago. And it's little known, but James is the one who actually nominated me as a PowerShell MVP back in the day, over 12, 13 years ago. So I've known him for quite a long time. He always brings interesting modules to the table. If you check out my PowerShell YouTube channel, he spoke last year about one of his other modules, Easy Format, which was really another excellent talk. So James, are you there?
I'm there, and thanks for the great introduction. Although I have a slight correction, it's easy out, not easy format.
I was close.
That's close. But today we got to talk about one with a different name, a different weird name. You know, it's a bit of a bad habit. So,
sounds good. So take it away, and we'll be on for till about 7:45, 8 o'clock. Just as a last thing, anybody, if you're on the call, if you want, drop questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we can unmute you and you can get your questions answered. James, take it away.
All right, let me go ahead and start sharing and then get started. Okay, so this is my talk on Irregular, or how I learned to stop worrying because regexes are the bomb. This talk was originally given for the 24 hours of DevOps, so it might be a little rusty. I'm going to be jumping in, kind of walking you through all sorts of fun regular expressions, know-how, and then I'm going to kind of show you a very fun toy for it. But before we get to any of that, let's, get a little bit about my background. So who am I? Well, I'm James. I was a PowerShell team member between 2006 and 2010. I tried and tested almost every aspect of PowerShell 2 and 3. Wrote all sorts of scripts basically to see what broke. So I basically got a number of years of my life paid to play with PowerShell and break PowerShell and make it better, which is pretty rewarding. So I decided to kind of somehow make that my full-time job outside Microsoft. I've been a PowerShell consultant for past decade and small change. I develop scripts and modules for myself and other clients. I train people about PowerShell, and I will have worked with a number of different clients over the years of all shapes and sizes. I've had to integrate far too many systems to count for far too many clients. And this means that I have to run into a particular, a particular set of skills, as Liam Neeson says, that are painful to master. Putting it simply, I really hate parsing, but I've had to get really good at it. I do, however, love PowerShell. I love building cool tools, and I love the object pipeline. So taking this hatred of parsing and this love of PowerShell together, something kind of cool has eventually resulted. First, let's understand why we need to get parsing. If you're a PowerShell person coming to this talk, hopefully you are, you already know the object pipeline, and you know that means you almost never have to parse. And there's a lot of exceptions to this rule, except when you're dealing with, console application output. You know, any non-Windows ecosystem thing that just loves to be an exe. Or non-standard data files. It's not JSON, it's not XML, it's not CSV, it's something, dare I say, worse. Legacy scripts and components also are a big pain in the butt here. Somebody could have written a old VB script that you have to deal with. You know, God help us. You could have to deal with a particular internal tool that ends up being an exe or has some interesting handshakes. You're going to keep coming around to it. And nowhere is this truer than the newest place PowerShell is making all sorts of waves, Linux. So if you're dealing with, you know, anything Linuxy in PowerShell, knowing how to parse is going to help you. In all of these circumstances, you're really going to need to know how to parse. Now, for most little basics, you can get by with dash like and stuff. For those that aren't familiar, PowerShell has all sorts of operators. Dash like is a simple wildcard matcher, and you can get a decent distance by just finding wildcards that work and splitting them. However, for anything, and I mean anything advanced, you're going to end up using regular expressions. And forgive me if you're a regex guru coming here for, you know, some understanding of the tool. I'm going to be guiding you through this talk as if you didn't know any regex at all. So, what is regex? Well, regular expressions are a DSL for matching patterns in text. They have something of a reputation. That reputation is, if you try to solve a problem with regular expressions, now you have two problems. And this is painfully sometimes true for a few reasons. One, regular expressions are not, well, not at all understood. They're generally not well explained when you run into them. They have this incredibly awkward syntax. Oh, and for bonus points, there's more than one of them. And basically really bad regex examples abound. Beyond that, for PowerShell people in particular, most examples that you'll find are not .NET regex, which in my biased view is a little bit more powerful. So, yeah, you're not going to have a very good impression of something if most of what you run into on the internet is poorly understood, awkwardly phrased, and doesn't work. So before we get into the cool tools, let's walk through how to make a little bit of this better. Specifically, let's walk through the advantages of using regex and some useful resources to do so, and the basics of using regex, and then a bit of advanced syntax. Advantages first. As alluded to earlier, you can only do so much with wildcards and index of. Simple matching might be easy, but extracting stuff will be hard. Like, it's easy enough to find out where numbers start in a string. Once you want to pull out those numbers, that's not going to be so easy. What about a timestamp? Well, do you want to go pull out a given string of a given length? What if it has, you know, subseconds? What if it has time zones? This gets annoying fast. And as annoying as that is, oh, it's nothing compared to replacement. If you wanted to go through an existing string with index of and with wildcard matching and replace stuff, you are going to drive yourself very quick, very soon, or very mad very soon. So that's not ideal. If only this wasn't a new problem. See, programmers have faced these sorts of problems for about a half century. And this means that, believe it or not, regex can succinctly solve most parsing problems you will run into. Unfortunately, this comes with syntax from the 70s that may or may not have involved multiple doobies. It's, again, arcane. Let's briefly discuss that awkward syntax before we go ahead and give it a PowerShell update. Again, This is assuming you know next to nothing about regex. Sorry if you already do, but if you didn't, regex can be very, very simple. In fact, really, really simple. Like regex would be a simple regex matching that string. Like if you need to find a string containing regex, that'll work. You don't have to overthink it. And in fact, it's actually ideal in regex to underthink it if you can. The only bad side, as alluded to, is that this would match it anywhere. You can actually very easily match it things at the beginning or end using, say, caret, which is the beginning, or dollar, which is the end of a line. Caret and dollar are anchors. The reason I'm bolding some of these terms is so that your brain remembers them and you can go to Google and they will help you. Anchors are great. They're wonderful to make sure that you are matching only from the beginning and the end of a string or end of a line. And they are incredibly helpful if you want to make sure that you're matching something in completion and not just finding matches within something. To match one or more times, you can use what's called a quantifier. Plus will match one or more. Question will match 0 or more. It's sometimes called the lazy quantifier. And star will match as many as possible. This is called the greedy quantifier. Please beware of the greedy quantifier. This is one of the most commonly abused and misused things in regex that can mislead you, especially if you're just randomly copying and pasting ones from the internet. The greedy quantifier will go to the last possible match of a thing, and this will often overmatch, which will often lead to very undesirable results. Most characters will match literally. Slash will escape. Easy escape sequence to remember. It's been in basically every language in C except for PowerShell and a few others. We use backticks. Dot will match any character. Within the brackets, you can match any set of characters. If you wanted to not match that bracket set of brackets, you could use the caret here. So caret bracket set is saying not that set of characters. There are also many character classes like /D for digits. And most have a non-class, which will match everything but this class. /D, big D for non-digits as an example. As a side note here, this is one of those areas where .NET regular expressions really shine. There are an incredibly large number of automatic capture groups you can use like this. The extraordinarily nice thing about Irregular as a module is that you won't have to actually remember any of that syntax because there's a nice tab completion for you with all their friendly names. But that's basically the structure of how that part of the regex syntax works. Now, if you wanted to cover this, just in the box, you can actually go ahead and run get help about _regular_ expressions. That'll give you a bunch of help on how regular expressions work in their basic, this sort of level. And they'll also kind of talk through a little bit about how some of the implicit operators in PowerShell handle regular expressions. Now that we've got some basics under our belts, though, let's go ahead and try to understand some advanced syntax. All right. This is going to get a little rough. So the first thing to understand is that regexes can be grouped. Parentheses pattern will denote a capturing group. That'll end up being captured into a number by default. If you want it to be a group, but you don't want it to be captured, you can put question : inside of the parentheses, and that will group but not capture it. This is good, this is useful, because then you can do quantifiers like how often they repeat on the whole group. What's even better, though, is you can do a named capture, and that's question less than name greater than pattern. Okay. So this is a really great trick because this allows you to basically go right back to that data and both extract it and replace it later. If you can have a named capture, you can go back and pull that data out into a property bag and be nice and happy. And you can replace the information in that. So you can kind of surgically change content if you use named captures correctly. Getting a little bit crazier. Dot plus pattern or question pattern will match at least one of anything up until including pattern. So if I have any character repeated until thing, this is a very handy little trick to be able to use to make your regular expressions match a large span of space up until another kind of, key piece. This kind of leads to another little bit obvious in retrospect sort of thing about regular expressions that isn't at all obvious when you start to deal with them, and that's regexes can be stacked. So if I have one pattern, a bunch of qualifiers, another pattern, a bunch of qualifiers, I can basically put a number of regexes in sequence. To give you a really simple example, I could have first pattern and then second pattern. Okay, that would be match A, then match B. All right. I can also use an atomic group to say match the first or the second, which will allow just one or the other. I could also, have a good old standard or, but in a lot of cases, you actually want an atomic or, you want it to be only one. In regex, an or will end up being both if it is possible, if it's not an atomic or. The other thing that you can do, as kind of alluded to back here, is basically match until. So this is mixing the greedy and lazy quantifier with any character. And this basically says first pattern, anything, 0 or more anythings, as many as possible until the first circumstance where this isn't possible to hit the second pattern. Okay. So this is a little tiny bit of syntax to understand and definitely a little awkward to look at. But once you get what this can do for you, this means you can take very complicated expressions and use them together in very powerful ways. Now, if that wasn't cool enough, you also have options with regexes. Common ones, well, interesting one first, actually. You can go right to left. The regex that you write is still left to right, so it's not insanely confusing compared to a normal regular expression, but you can actually match from the end or beginning of a string using this option, and you can do that with very complicated content. That's an easy one to get. Another one, ignore case. Most of the PowerShell operators are going to do this for you by default, dash match, dash split, dash replace, they'll use them. But this will allow you to not worry so much whether it's a little a or a big A or any other casing specific issues. The real kicker, though, is ignore pattern white space. See, one of the most common misconceptions about regexes is that you cannot comment regexes. Yes, you can. You can comment regexes with the same sort of syntax as you do in PowerShell with the good old number sign followed by content, but you have to have ignore pattern white space on as an option. Now, this format of commenting is supported more broadly, but neither form of comments is commonly found in regular expressions on the internet, and that kind of drives me nuts. Kind of makes it harder for us all to learn the thing. Definitely did not make learning all this stuff over time easier. So now that you know enough to be dangerous, let's go and see how we can script all this. Okay. PowerShell supports regex in a few ways. One we've already talked about, and that's implicit operators. Dash match, dash not match, dash replace, and dash split. They will work. I've got this in air quotes for a reason. See, match will populate dollar matches, which only contains the last match. That is a very misleading variable name there. So dollar matches will have it's a hash table. .0 would be the whole match, and .name of capture, .number of capture would allow you to get to a particular named capture. But again, it's only one match. So if I wanted to deal with something complicated or match multiple times within the string, dash match is my friend only a little bit, and dash matches is kind of a misleading variable name. Beyond that, and varying light frustration, dash replace and dash split will ignore your regex options. They just don't pay attention to them. So if you create a regex with options, match will honor those options, dash ignore or replace and dash split will not. So this is not ideal. Luckily, because PowerShell is built on top of .NET, we can kind of go directly to the source. You can go ahead and explore the static members of regex with regex pipe to get member static. And I will kind of go break into demo mode here for a half second just to show that. So we have some preview of what's to come.
Can you make the font a little bigger?
In a bit.
Thanks.
Maybe.
That's good. Great.
There you go.
Thanks.
All right. You're welcome. So, getting ahead of myself there, we're going to look at regex options. Regex, that's the static class in .NET, or the class name in .NET. To get its full name, it's system text regular expressions.regex. This is a type accelerator in PowerShell. It's nice and easy to work with. And you can get member static. And look, I can escape a regex, I can match regex, so I can use matches, so I can find multiple ones within a given string. I can determine if they are a match, I can replace, I can split, I can unescape. It's nice. So this ends up being the preferred method. You can also cast a individual regex that you've created to a regex object, and that'll give you a few more methods. We'll come back to that later. Replace, when passed a script block, will let you replace with a custom script block. Now, if you're not familiar with this part of PowerShell, this is actually a really handy general thing to know. I think since PowerShell version 3, this has been fairly complete, although it was mostly there in 2. Delegates will be castable to a script block will be castable to any delegate. So in this case, there's a delegate that you can pass replace that will say, hey, here's a C# method that would handle, this particular replacement. You can just go ahead and pass it a PowerShell script. It'll work. It's very flexible. Of course, these are a little bit raw in syntax compared to dash match and replace and split, and I wanted to make it a little bit easier than that. So, kind of already tilted a little bit of what I'm talking about.
Hey, James, we got a question.
Oh, sure.
If you use -match, it returns the last match. If you use regex : match, does it return the first or the last match? Do you know?
It'll return the first match.
Awesome.
And dash match will, I believe, return the first match as well.
Yeah. Okay. So both. Gotcha.
The bigger thing is that regex matches will return all matches.
All matches in the target string you're looking at. Okay.
Yeah. And, before I get too far into this sort of module explanation, I should kind of, stop here for a second and blame Doug. The kind of genesis of Irregular past spending way too much time learning regex over the years was Mr. Fink had built a string scanner.
Yep.
in regular expression string scanner. that was a little inspiring, but wasn't very PowerShell in syntax. It was like a class port from Python. So it got me thinking like, all right, although that's a cool capability, how could I, make PowerShell more regexy and still have it be PowerShell-y? So this is what came out of it. It's a little weird. It's a little fun. It's a PowerShell module for regex. It's cross-platform, open source, and it's available on the PowerShell gallery, and it has a few interesting goals. Kind of obvious one is writing regular expressions, like, helping you write regular expressions, helping me write regular expressions, making them a little bit more accessible to write, period. Number two, using regular expressions. It's often hard enough to find one that works that it's kind of odd to get used to using them kind of nonchalantly. But I wanted to enable that. I wanted to basically have a good library of working regular expressions that I could use for a variety of purposes that I could essentially, keep coming back to and make easy for both myself and others. Kind of related to that, I wanted to be able to manage this library of regular expressions. Like I wanted to have a way to logically manage how I store regular expressions inside of a module, this module, or any one. Beyond that, there are a couple of less traditional, interesting goals. Be useful, fun, and educational. I want to get mileage out of it. I want to enjoy doing it. And I want it to teach people stuff about regex. And the last one, and the weirdest one, is bend expectations. And by this, I mean bend expectations of what PowerShell is capable of as a language. One of the very fun things about this module is that it uses some interesting techniques to kind of expose PowerShell, regular expressions to PowerShell in a brand new kind of DSL-like format. You can go ahead and give it a try. You can install module regular scope current user, and then import module regular, and we're going to go take a look. Starting off with, let's get commands. I'm going to move this out of the way before you all get too tempted. All right. In terms of pure functions, it's pretty small, actually. Only, what, 7? We're going to start with write regex. Before we get into demo mode more, and I kind of want you to understand some of its syntax and what it's setting out to do. As the name kind of implies, it's there to help you write regular expressions, and it has nice parameters for almost every arcane regex. Let's take one example, regex character class symbol currency. Okay, so never was going to remember that myself. Great to have tab completion there. Let's go look at symbol math. This is one of my favorite little examples of this here. I'm going to go ahead and assign that to on this here, and all chars is 0.64 kilobyte minus 1 as int. Yep, okay. So then let's go ahead and arm matches all characters. Those are all symbols. So yeah, nice, simple, easy. Oh, here, let's make that repeat. This one doesn't have as many sequentials, but oh well. So that's one parameter out of oh so many. To be clear on how you use this, you can pipe regex back into itself. So I could say currency symbol followed by digits or literal characters repeated. Okay, and there's symbol currency. Digits or literal characters repeated. Okay. So now I've got a little regex there. And 199. Note that it matches the first one, not the second one. And again, I don't have to sit here remembering, oh, symbol currency is /p, little /p, brace, SC, brace. So, yeah, that's convenient. Write regex only requires itself, and you can directly embed it. Now, I haven't been doing too much of this. It is a capability that I think I will use more in modules that need to more dynamically build regexes, but it is still a handy thing to know. It is also one of the general thoughts around Irregular, that it is supposed to be a very embeddable module. Now, parameters have help, and they use validate set. To kind of, go give you the long form of idea here of this. So I'm going to go back to character class here, and I'm just going to keep hitting tab. You have no idea how long it took to type all of this stuff. But now you don't have to.
Isn't that what PowerShell was all about? Somebody else writes a million lines of code so I can be a genius in 3 lines?
I believe you understand the ethos, yes.
Cool.
Just to kind of get an idea of how many parameters we're looking at here, let's go ahead and use a good basic PowerShell command, get command, and write regex -syntax. Well, that's a few. And we can also get help on these parameters.
Hey, there's a question as you're typing. Is there an extensibility model to say craft a regex for an email address or a URL?
Funny you should ask about that particular one. We are going to come back to email addresses. As far as URLs, you don't really need one.
Excellent. Sounds good.
There are a couple that we have that we're going to cover later on that can have like embedded variables within URLs, but in case you're not aware, basically anything can become a URI. And that then gives you all sorts of extra properties on it. So if I did that, yay, I have an absolute URI. This is less informative. And I can also do something. I don't think Google has FTP, but yeah. I swear anything really can become a URI. Almost. What was the character that hated things? Maybe asterisk? Nope. You're getting my point. So you don't need a regex for that one because there's a good native data type. We will come back to the regexes for emails. And I believe, if I remember my slide deck, when I say we'll come back, I think it's like about the next thing we're going to get to. It is actually an example on write regex. I did already cover that. Again, there's parameter level help on all of this. What I have not covered, or haven't really kind of stopped and smelled the roses to show, is that when you have imported Irregular, you can see the syntax highlighting on a given regular expression. This one's pretty simple, so it's not that fancy yet. This is actually an incredibly useful thing when we get to more complicated regular expressions to kind of give you a sneak peek here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So, yeah, can be nice. Coming back to the presentation. As I said, let's look at a regular expression for email addresses. Now, this happens to be an example of write regex. Although I think I have a slightly better one within the module itself. But to give you an idea of what this can look like, so what I'm writing is a capture name for email address with an interior pattern where I'm going to match a word and then literal characters dash or dot or a word repeated minimum or 0 or more times. So that's foo@bar.com, or rather this part is the foo. Or if you had foo dot or foo dash, any of the other valid characters, that would also match, and keep matching the remaining words after that, but not keep matching infinitely up until you run into an @ which is the middle of your domain. I'm not going to go through the insanity that is trying to figure out what are all the valid domains in the world. You can do a DNS lookup for that. But what I can say is that anything after the @ is the domain, and that it's going to be a word, which could also have, again, dashes within it, because that's valid in domain names, followed by a dot, followed by whatever domain suffix. And we have 2 name captures in this, the email address and the domain. All right. There's a little bit more syntax highlighting. I'm going to go assign this off to a variable. Yay, that matched. That did not. By the way, oddity of regex here, match will actually return a value when you don't match. It will tell you whether that matched in success. And each matches might have the same thing for a given capture. But yeah, you can do that for an email. Since this is a at least somewhat complicated regex, or at least what I would consider a somewhat complicated regex maybe 6 months or a year ago, I want to kind of pause here and see if there are questions more about this, or more questions about this. So email regex, there's the final regex there. And there's the source of that regex. So again, pausing for a second, seeing if anybody has any questions.
I don't know if you're looking at the chat, but no questions yet.
All right. Whoever particularly asked about email, does this make sense to you? I'm not necessarily asking if this makes sense to you as much as if this makes sense to you, because that's kind of part of the point.
Yeah, they got a yes in the chat saying look good. Yeah, makes sense.
All right, then. So then let's kind of move on from that regular expression to the real fun part, the main event, use regex. See, use regex lets you use regular expressions. That's kind of the name implies.
We just got another question. What if you wanted to AL/SL accommodate subdomains? Oh, also accommodate subdomains, like joe@nyu.gmail.com.
This would accommodate subdomains.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I mean, let's go ahead and double check here for a second, but it at least should. So joe@nyu.email.com. Actually, no, you pointed out a good bug in mine. It should allow for multiple repetitions of domains there. We'll come back to this, but I'm going to go ahead and bring up GitHub and kind of give you a user challenge here for a second. Also kind of bringing up the point of why this is a little bit better than asking for help on Stack Overflow. Could you go ahead and file me an issue?
Oh, you want me to do it?
No, I want the guy who just found it to do it.
Oh, John, you up for are you on GitHub? Can you file an issue on subdomains?
I actually want to verify that it works with or not with email address first, just in terms of good testing. And that is jumping the gun a little bit, but here's the static form of that. Let's see. I think I see the same potential bug there, but we're going to find out. And again, I'm jumping the gun a little bit on how this module all works, and it's fun, but you know,
I don't know if he's going to be able. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it. He's got to find his GitHub user ID.
Nope.
Somebody just meant. Somebody also mentioned
there.
So somebody else mentioned search did not include the @ sign.
Not sure what you mean there.
Yeah, I think in the original one, didn't it capture? Or
it's not. It doesn't need to capture the @ sign. The @ just part of the email. You're not concerned about the @ You're concerned about what's before and after the @
Exactly.
The @ is just what tells you, hey, it's a valid email.
Exactly.
But thank you for pointing that out, and I am sorry. But again, this is the relative joy. You can say, hey, here's a bug report on one of your regexes. Whereas if you do the same sort of thing with the Stack Overflow, you can upvote and downvote, but that bad regex remains, and you never get it fixed. I am pretty committed to having this be a good source of reusable regexes, and I'm kind of annoyed at myself for not, checking that particular one. So, back to the main event. Use regex. Can you all hear me? Yeah?
Yep.
We're good. All right. Like Write, it's got lots of parameters to play with and lots of aliases. This is general habit of mine. I tend to write commands in a way that is very alias happy. This way you don't necessarily have to remember, is it expression parameters or expression parameters? But yeah, there are quite a few built-in parameters here. These will let you do all sorts of interesting, fun things with regex. We're going to cover a few of them in specific. Extract and coerce are probably my favorite, although I'll be honest, I use extract more than coerce. It's also got a game-breaking trick up its sleeve, which at this point I have accidentally demonstrated a couple times. It is a smart function. By that I mean it can change its behavior depending on how it's called. You call it with a series of smart aliases, and email address is one of them. So basically what it will do is it will take everything beneath a certain location and it will boil them all up into regex syntax that you can use. You can use get regex to explore what's there, and I can use any of these formats to go quickly find and match one. So before I get too far ahead of my demo here, back to this for a second. You can pipe text, files, and script blocks to use regex. This is extraordinarily helpful, especially when it comes to finding needles and haystacks within multiple files and directories. One way to think of this is kind of like select string on steroids. But yeah, it's handy. There are lots and lots of regexes in the box. In fact, at this point, I think I just cracked 80. I just ran the command that could tell me. So let's go ahead and see. How many do I have in the box now? Yep, 81 regexes to play with. No promises they all work perfectly, but you are always welcome to file an issue. So let's look at a few of them in particular. Email address we've already kind of talked about, so I'm not going to come back to that one that much. Rest variable was one that was sort of asked about earlier, and it's kind of cool. So let's take a look at that one. Rest variable is a way to extract parts of a query string or URI that contain parameters. So let's go ahead and take an example real quick. I'm going to go create a new tab, Azure DevOps REST API. Sure. Any one of these will do. So I'm going to go copy this REST API from here to there. And I'm going to go pipe it to REST variable. Oh, look, there's the organization, the project, and the feed ID. Now, this is especially nice because I can say replace. I can provide an evaluator to go run a script instead, or I can basically replace with a given string. So I could use this to very rapidly kind of copy and paste from documentation and turn it into something like invoke REST method. In fact, this is something that I use pretty extensively in a module around Azure DevOps and GitHub called PS DevOps. So that's REST variable. I guess one more thing to demonstrate is that it can take a few different forms, these arguments. This might be clear if you're reading that there. You can take the form that you run into Go, with Go a lot, and it can take a bracket form, which is friendly for also being smart aliased. And if I wanted to just get rid of them all entirely, I suppose I would have to replace with a space at this point.
Can you replace them like you do with -F on a string replacement, or that I'm thinking about it wrong?
Not exactly so easily, but I probably should build that sort of a parameter. Let me know how you'd like it to be in an issue.
Okay.
But the one thing that I tend to do is look for a variable name in a match, or go ahead and look for the match within a dictionary. So if you want, I can go jump over to a couple of functions that use this in practice, and I can go show you how those are structured.
Or you can just, if you want to continue on what you were talking, would be fine too.
Okay, cool. All right, we're going through. There's plenty enough to cover. Besides, compared to the next one, you're going to see that regex is nothing. So the next one's just crazy. Git log. Git log is great as a command, right? And we can all agree that it's nice to be able to go to our repositories. So I can go documents, Windows PowerShell modules, irregular, git log, and 100. I should not have done that in code. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm going to go to the ISE for a second and regret ever opening code. We'll come back to that in code in a little bit. Gonna go reload here. In case anybody else isn't familiar with that, sometimes Git commands aren't exactly happy running in code and will try to be more interactive than they should be, which is what just happened to me. So I'm going to go ahead and get the git log there. This is great. It's useful information. The only problem is, obviously, if I pipe it to get member, it's just a string. And I don't know how much effort anybody here has put into pulling information that is not a string out of it, but it has not been fun. I do feel like I need to actually switch to either code or terminal, though, to kind of, show the full joy here.
I think if you go back to VS Code, you can probably hit Q, and that should drop you out of the Git log.
All right. So let's see if this is nice enough when I assign it. Thank you. All right, so I've got my nice text log there. I've got a much less nice looking regex to parse git logs. Just a little bit more.
Was that Perl?
I mean, no.
Looks like Perl to me, but okay, it's a regex. It's cool.
Might as well be. But I got good news here. You know, that if these things get complicated enough, I end up making those have a source file.
Gotcha.
So here is the file that's used to generate that regex. And while it's a lot of right regexes in a row, this looked a little bit more readable.
Yes.
Than that.
Much more readable.
Important thing is that they both work. The other important thing, just from a lot of personal experience, is that if you have this sort of a file, you can basically uncomment out after a step and leave the part where it sets content in and then just reload Irregular and try again and keep doing that. That's basically why this thing was here. This is a sign I didn't get this right on the first try.
Gotcha. Cool.
You bet. No way in hell. But it's, you know, well thought out. It's capturing what I want. I guess here's a nice little other trick to show. You can use regex with any of these built-in patterns. So this here will actually go include the pattern for hex digits. So this means you can kind of build regexes with regex on top of other stuff that you've already built, or on top of stuff that I've already built, or that exists in the module. Okay. So, you know, terrifying as that all was, let's go ahead and take our git log. This has to be a little bit weirdly treated here. If I remember correctly, I have to join it by new lines because it comes back as multiples and I want it to come back as one. Boom. Now I wanted to kind of talk about, you know, some degree of other parameters for that for a second. There's extract. So let's go ahead and say where object, get username like James. And just to kind of prove the point, I'm sorry, other people should help. So that's pulling git logs out into objects with PowerShell. I can get member, I have commit date, I have commit hash, I have commit message, and get user email, and get username, and hex digits. I could also use the cache or the cast or coerce parameter to provide a script block or type. So now I'm not going to go through this right now because it's actually not as easy as it looks in this case, but I could turn this into a real date time. I could turn this into a richer object if I'd like. I could compute this as actual decimal. Whatever.
So does that work like select object where you're passing in a hash table with a name and an expression?
Close to, but not the same form.
Gotcha.
You're passing in the name, not a hash table with a key name and a value expression, but a hash table key value expression.
Okay, gotcha.
You know, so yeah, as I said, I've not gotten anywhere near as much mileage, honestly, as I have gotten out with extract pipe to a for each object.
Makes sense. Cool.
There is also some stuff that's kind of interesting, like you can provide a where condition here. So I could say where commit date like star APR should do it. And at that point, it's actually returning me back the match, even after I did the where. If I pass extract, it's then returning me, just give me what was in April. How busy was I in April so far? You know, Could be better, could be worse. There was actually a new version of Irregular put out today, so it is a pretty frequently revised module, and I intend for it to stay that way until I run out of good regexes to write, which doesn't seem like it's happening anytime soon. All right, so that was the madness that is git log. In crazy in another form way, let's take a quick look at multi-line comment. Now, everything that we've dealt with so far has been, sorry, wrong editor, has been a regex that we directly provide. And this looks basically the same. This is how, or sorry, everything that we've discussed so far has been a regex stored on disk, just a simple pattern. Multi-line comment is a little bit interesting in that it is a pattern generator, and this allows it to have additional parameters and basically be a script that returns a pattern. So I can say, here, give me a PowerShell multi-line comment or a C# multi-line comment. And if I want, I can actually go ahead and say, give me everything in this directory, hell, even recursively, find all the multi-line comments within it. What's especially interesting about this, if you look, see this one here? That's from an XML file. That one's from PowerShell. So this will actually be able to be smart enough to look at the extension of the input object and say, oh, I'm going to use this variation of the pattern for the language parameter. And you can also target it to a given language, as we've kind of already shown. So I could say, just give me back XML comments. Perhaps my input object parameter is being a little too strong for me right now. Let's go ahead and say this. There we go. And to take a quick look at how this works, I'm going to go to its source file here. That's a multi-line comment.regex.ps1. And yes, I am basically overriding language, not allowing it to matter if you provide a file. So it'll basically say, hey, you provided a file. So one of those particular parameters, okay, I'm going to use this language style formatting. Otherwise, I'll use that language style formatting. Otherwise, I'm going to use this. And then it has a lookup table and a switch for various forms of formatting. Kind of luckily for me, there's really only actually a few in various different languages. You just kind of have to look at them the right way. Although I'm always open to handle more than I already handle with any of these. So that's multi-line comment. I've kind of already peeked at a little bit of how this particular one works because we've been using it just implicitly. See, Irregular keeps regular expressions in a regex subfolder. And your module can too. You can import regex from module foo. That'll pull in all the regexes declared in foo. star.regex.txt files will contain the regex itself. And by convention, star.regex.source.ps1 files will generate those. You can also have, you can also have generators. We'll come back again to them in a second. Regex text files have a couple of default options. They are case insensitive and they ignore pattern white space so that they can have documentation. And most of them do, because I want regexes to be more understandable and less arcane to look at. I want both the sourced file to have some degree of documentation and natural flow, and the regexes too as well. Regex PS1, we've kind of talked about a little bit. They are quite powerful. They're regex generators. Again, they can have parameters of their own. They can also change their behavior based off of the input object. So, powerful juju. Multi-line comment, as we kind of established, will auto-detect the language based off of the file extension. And this is really, really nice and handy. In case this wasn't kind of obvious, import regex runs when you import module regular. In case you wanted to find out the commands exposed this way, oh, sorry there. I'm going to go ahead and say get command module irregular command type alias. Told you there were a bunch. All right, so that's import regex. Get regex we briefly talked about as well already. It lists regular expressions. It includes names and descriptions by default, and it allows you to return regexes for some ad hoc embedding. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some examples of that, getting them as a pattern, for instance. So we've done get regex a couple times before. There's a list of all the built-in regexes with a description. That happens to be the first line of their comments. Remember I said most of these regexes are commented. Well, all right, I missed a spot. But it looks like all but one have some basic documentation, which is nice. I can go ahead and say get regex tag here. This is a fun one, by the way. Balance markup tags there. I can also say, the original example, get regex name digits as pattern. And this will give me back the static constructor of this with a nice little here doc and the embedded regex. This makes this particularly easy to basically play with on the fly and lightly steal regexes that work from here. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I've taken rest variable and used it in a lot of different modules at this point. So let's take a quick look at how that works. So we already did. Let's take a look at how export regex, its cousin, works. That'll let you export or embed irregular and export patterns as variables. So let's go ahead and export everything we've got. Sure, I'll do it here. Actually, back to code. Name star. And we wanted to do as variables. All right. Let's go ahead and open that up. And here's the entire library of regexes exported for me. So there's certain things that this doesn't particularly like from a script analyzer perspective, because this is just a library file declaring these things. This lets me easily reuse them. I can also export as a hash table of expressions if that's what's preferred. Okay, so here's my hash table start, collapse it all to nothing. And there's each of the individual regexes within there. You can obviously filter with dash name if I'd like. One other fun one to note is that you can actually embed some regular expressions and use regex as a variable. And you can do that with as lambda. That's a bit of code to fly by really quickly. So let me, straighten that up. So this is the definition of use regex. And this is your regex library being declared. And that allows you to embed basically the functional part of this into whatever module you'd like, including the regexes you need. So that's nifty. And if that wasn't crazy enough, you can also embed the entire engine in your module with the as hash table approach, or with, sorry, this thing was written a bit ago. There is now a better option. You can have as embedded engine. And embedded engine will allow you to take the capability to just have a regex folder of your own and make it work. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, name star. Let's go back to code engine PS1. Oh, I'm sorry, I should update my slide deck for such demos. Suffice it to say that I have used this to actually bootstrap a couple modules to include it, and that it could be improved. All right, moving on from that. You can keep expressions inside of regex without exporting commands. And when you use, we already covered this a little bit, when you use irregular as a lambda, variables will create that map and internal use regex to your expressions. So you can basically say this slightly more awkward form, run a script variable containing an email address instead. So that's export regex. There's other stuff I can riff on. There's fun new regexes that I wanted to share. Before we kind of completely dismount, I think I'm going to do some of that. The one that I believe is freshest is there's now a PowerShell parameter set. I don't know if anybody else has some of the same problems that I do in terms of making sure they manage their parameter sets and being able to find them easily. Oh, this helps a lot. Also, remember how I said I use the REST variable inside of a lot of modules? Well, this one uses parameter sets to say what the REST path will be. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, it's going to be in home documents, Windows PowerShell modules, PS DevOps. This has a lot of parameter sets. Just a few. I'm going to go ahead and extract that. Select object, expand property, parameter set, name, unique. So that's a nifty example. And I did have this one up at the beginning, actually, because I have a lightning round talk in the upcoming PowerShell Summit on this. These are other ones that are nice to know. So I can go ahead and get all the files underneath Irregular. I already covered multi-line comment. Another PowerShell one that's useful is requires. So if I wanted to actually say both the match file and the value, well, that script requires that, and that script requires that, and that script requires that. Another one that's really useful is help field. So this will extract out examples. As an example, I can also find all the links within my commands this way, or just ask for the description. And one other misconception of regex that I love to kind of bust is that you can actually balance brackets or curly brackets or parentheses. And that you can do. Let's do just the PS1s in this directory. So yeah, you can do advanced balancing groups in .NET regexes, and this can let you find all the stuff beneath parentheses, including nested parentheses, perfectly. And you don't have to remember that. Believe me, I don't. I remember that I have this regex already written that can serve as a guide for how to do this in the future. One last just kind of nice little mind-blowing one I like to call regexception, and you'll see why in a second. So there's HTML linked data. This is a fairly simple regex that'll go take a script of the type or tag of the type application/LD plus JSON, which is used for basically for search engine optimization to provide rich linked data to a search engine, but you can go ahead and get that rich linked data for yourself. So I'm going to go grab data about what movie exactly? Oh, I don't know. We'll find out in a half second. I think it has a thumbnail. We'll see when I can, get member it. So here's my link data. And it does have an image. And what is it we're up to right now? Yes. Good old regex inception. So yeah, have fun grabbing rich data from IMDb or recipe sites or anything else that has linked data, which is about anything. That's a nice one to know about. And that's about all the fun I have time to show today, I think.
That's great.
So I'm going to go back to the slide deck and stop presentation and show the future. Now, Regular is going to keep on growing. It is a useful collection of regular expressions and a new way to script, and I want it to keep getting better. So I'm happy to take suggestions, issues, and pull requests. github.com/startautomating/irregular. I also love, at this point, challenging regular expressions of general usefulness because, well, I'm kind of broken. It's, better me than thee sort of a thing. So if you want, you can actually go and create a new issue of that particular sort. In fact, there is now an issue template for that. I'm sorry. If I go to new issues here, I can actually go and request a regex here. And I'm happy to go ahead and at least take a look at trying to write your regex for you. It might be fun. If I hate it, I won't get to it. I would also love pull requests if anybody has them with interesting regexes. And I'd love a regular to be a better source for people to help learn regex in the future. So I'm happy to teach you more, both, in some degree of like Discord chat, tweet, email sort of thing, or in official training. Again, you can reach out on Twitter if I ever log on. That's at James Brew. And email will also work, james.brundage@start-automating. You can also find me on the PowerShell Discord at Start Automating. And that's about all I got for the day. Doug, you ready for me to turn it back over to you? Does anybody have any questions?
That was great. Thank you. Excellent walkthrough on multiple levels. I even saw a particular regex that you did with a minus, I think it was question mark, less than sign, minus depth for like doing a decrement.
Yes, those are balancing groups.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen the minus used like that. So I learned something as well. Awesome. So if anybody's got questions, now's a good time to toss them up. Otherwise, James has provided a whole bunch, get up on GitHub, get over to the Irregular repo. You can have conversations there. Definitely pull down the module. Do you have the, so you can get it off on the PS Gallery. You can do an install -module on Irregular.
Mm-hmm.
And if folks are not on the Discord, is it Discord, right?
Yeah.
So up on the Discord, J. Cool has a Discord server that a ton of us hang out on, and we chat. A lot of helpful people answering questions. Is another great resource to deal with or work with. And James is on there. I'm on there as well as J. Cool and a whole bunch of other MVPs in the PowerShell space. Great place to hang out, chat. So I don't see any more questions. So think we're good. And make sure you get up on the meetup.com. I'm talking to a few people about some talking opportunities. And also, I just want to throw this out as well. I'm thinking of doing a set of a user group where it's just lightning talks. So if you want to dip your toe into the speaking realm, if you want to learn how to, if you want to step up and do a talk, you can. I'm looking at if you want to do like a 5 or 10 minute talk. Keep an eye on that. Send me an email if you're interested in doing some talks. I'm going to gather a bunch of people. Maybe we'll do like an hour or two of people just doing 10-minute lightning round discussions on topics or projects that you like to work with. And keep an eye out for that coming as well. So people are enjoyed the presentation. Reminds me of a San Diego presentations from Greg. I guess you were down in San Diego doing presentations, James?
Not for many years.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have the Discord link, but all good. All right, sir. Well, thank you again. And maybe we'll see you at another talk coming down the road. I know you're going to be talking at the PS Summit, right?
That's right. And this will be part of the talk on PS Summit or PS Summit, and there will be a lightning round on this specifically.
Awesome.
So,
and once I get this, I'll post the video up on YouTube. So if you want to use it as a reference going forward, it'll be available. All right, James. Thanks again. Everybody have a good night. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.